Rent to rent in 2026 is dead, and here's why. If I was starting again in the Airbnb and short-term rental space in 2026, I would not start with rent to rent. I'd build an Airbnb management business instead. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why. Airbnb management is probably one of the simplest business models that you'll ever hear. The problem is people massively overcomplicate it. People hear terms like service accommodation, co-hosting, management, landlord partnership, and they get scared off. And they usually assume that you need years of property experience to do any of this, which is not true at all. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what Airbnb management is, the costs involved to get started, how to actually find landlords to do this, and why I believe it's one of the best business models that you can get started in 2026. So let's start with the biggest question. What is Airbnb management? Airbnb management, in simple terms, is running someone else's property on short term for them on platforms such as Airbnb and Booking.com. And that's it. That's as simple as the business is. So think of it like this. Imagine your neighbor owns a property and they're struggling with it. They're struggling to get long-term tenants. They have vacancies, they have void periods, or maybe they're even running it as a short-term rental already and they're not making enough money. The occupancy is low and they're just stressed out trying to run it because they don't have the time, expertise, and they don't even want to do it. They're too busy, they have a full-time job, they don't have the time to check guests in, message them back at midnight, manage cleaners, maintenance, and all of that. So what do these people do? They hire somebody else, and that's exactly where you come in. Your business is the middleman, and you provide a service for landlords that is hands-off, stress-free, and going to make them more money. You come in with the expertise, the knowledge, and the experience in managing properties professionally on short term, and you're going to do all of it for them. So there's no work for them. So you optimize the pricing, you schedule cleaning, you get maintenance in when it's needed, and you'll do all the guest communication. The landlord still owns the property and they still benefit from all the revenue that's made. You just take a percentage of every single booking that comes in. Anywhere from 15 to 20% is industry standard. So for example, let's say that property makes €3,000 of revenue in the month. That's €600 of clean profit into your pocket. And the margins are almost 100%, especially if you're doing this yourself. If you don't have to, have a team of employees and all of this, the margins are 90 to 100% because you don't have any overheads. You're not going to have an office. You're not going to have expenses. You're not going to have all the bills that would come with a rent-to-rent deal because you don't actually take on the lease. All the bills, all the expenses, all the overheads is the responsibility of the landlord. You just take 15 to 20% of the revenue every single month for managing it and making the landlord more money. And also just making a life more stress-free. So let's compare this to rent-to-rent. With rent-to-rent, you're taking on the risk of having to pay all the bills, whether that property is occupied or not occupied. You still have to make the rent every month, to make the utilities every month, and you still have to cover all of the expenses. You're also paying deposits, you're furnishing properties. So it's a decent chunk of money to actually get started in rent-to-rent. Anywhere from, let's say, 5k onwards is a typical starting amount to get your first rent-to-rent deal in the UK, for example. And don't get me wrong, the business model still works under certain circumstances. I'm not completely against it, but the Airbnb management model is just 10 times better. You're not committing thousands to acquiring the property or even having to pay bills or worry about all the overheads every single month and being able to cover them if you're having a loan month. You're not taking on someone else's lease and you're not tying up loads of capital into one property. Instead, you're providing a service which helps landlords make more money while removing the workload from them. That's why I believe this is one of the best business models for beginners, because not only is it a low barrier to entry, you don't need experience, you don't need a lot of money to get started. You can do this from anywhere in the world. You can do this from your phone. I was running everything from a villa in Greece from my phone over there. So let's break this down very simply in terms of how you actually make money through Airbnb management. Let's look at the actual numbers of an average property. Like I said earlier, if a property does about 3,000 in revenue for the month, which is probably on the lower end for most properties in Ireland and the UK, but let's just say it does €3,000 in revenue on 1 month, and your cut is 20% of that 3,000. That's €600 of clean profit into your pocket. It's not life-changing money. It's not going to allow you to quit your job overnight, but it gives you proof of concept that this actually works and you can make money online without having to invest thousands and without having to have crazy knowledge on how to do it. Now imagine you have 5 properties down that. You have €3,000 a month, 10 properties down that. That's €6,000 in clean profit every single month. And like I said, that's on a conservative and lower end of the scale. There's properties making 4, 5, 6,000 and upwards every single month in revenue. And again, you're getting 20% of the booking revenue. So like I said, one property is not going to change your life. But at scale, we have 5, 10 plus properties and you can get there very quickly. The cash flow and money becomes crazy. And like I said, you're not buying any of these properties, you're not signing any leases. You simply just built relationships with landlords that trusted you to operate their property on a short-term basis, make them more money and take the workload off of them. And that's a completely different way of looking at property. Rather than having to buy a property, sign a lease, doing rent to rent. This is a completely different method. And again, I believe it's the best method for starting out in property. One of the most common questions I'm getting asked lately is, how do you actually go about getting your first Airbnb management deal? Because most people assume that landlords won't trust them. But the reality is landlords don't want to run Airbnbs. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the time, and they just don't want to do it. For them, it's a massive headache, and they just don't want the nuisance of it in their life. Having to worry about pricing, guest communication, cleaning, maintenance, and everything else on a day-to-day basis. They don't want to do it. Because if they did want to do it, they probably would be doing it already. And if they are doing it already, they're more than likely doing it to a very poor standard. So they want someone else to come in and make the process simple. They don't want someone that's a perfectionist and knows every single thing about the model. When me and my team speak to landlords, we're not trying to convince them to hand the keys over. We explain to them simply how we can professionally manage our property, make them more money, and take the stress and workload off of their shoulders. And that's exactly what they're paying for. You're providing the solution to the problem that they have. You don't need to sound like a perfectionist to get landlords to be able to trust you to do this. You just need to be able to communicate effectively, be professional, and build up trust and a relationship with these landlords. And they'll start throwing the properties at you. Another common question people always ask me is, how does this scale? How quick can I start getting my first property, fifth property, 10th property? And to be honest, this is probably my favorite part of the business. How scalable this is. Genuinely, we done 30 properties in Ireland last month. If I was to do that on rent to rent in the UK, it would be a massive amount of money. If I was to do it in Dubai, I can't even explain how much money that would cost to get 30 rent to rent properties, rent to rent or subleasing properties in Dubai. You're talking hundreds of thousands of euros. With Airbnb management, there's essentially no cost to get started. You can start reaching out to landlords tomorrow and offer your services. Now, are you going to sign a massive amount of deals using that method? Maybe, maybe not. There's more effective methods that, I show my clients and my students how to acquire leads properly, but anybody can actually start this for free. In rent to rent, you need money to get started. With buying, you need massive amounts of money to get your deposit and mortgage approved. With this, you don't need any money to get started. That's the beauty of this. And once you get your first property and you build out all the systems and the templates and the SOPs, property number 2 and onwards doesn't mean starting again, because you already have everything set in place. You already have the cleaners, you already have the contacts for maintenance, you already have all the knowledge on how to price strategically. So instead of rebuilding the business, you're essentially just plugging in another landlord to a system they already have. And that's exactly how we scaled so fast in Ireland. And it's also how many of my students are doing the exact same thing as we speak. People often ask how I'm able to spend time in Dubai, in Greece, being able to travel the world when I want to. And the answer isn't that I just work harder. It's that I have the correct systems that allow me to work remotely from anywhere in the world. The guest messages are automated. Pricing updates automatically. Cleaners are notified when our software is. And virtual assistants do all of the guest communication. We have SOPs for almost everything. So instead of spending hours every single day on my phone, almost making it a second job, I get to focus more on the growth decisions for the business, the actual vision of scaling, different markets, different properties, growing the business. And that's a huge difference because at that stage, you're building a business, not another job. As I said earlier on, in 2026, I believe this is the best time to get involved in Airbnb management, especially in the likes of Ireland and the UK. Because now more than ever, landlords are desperate for a solution to the issues that they're having, especially with new regulations coming in that are almost forcing landlords out of the market. Many landlords are selling their properties because they don't want to have a tenant in the property and be locked in for 6 years and have rent caps and all of this headache that comes with the new regulations within Ireland and the UK. You are coming in and you are providing a solution to their problem. That's the best way to think of this. You're coming in, you're providing the solution, you're taking all of that stress, headache and workload off of them, and you're also making them more money. Because at the end of the day, most landlords are numbers people. They want to know how much they're making and how passive it is. If you can do that for them, I'm telling you right now, landlords will throw the properties at you. And the barrier for entry is actually much lower than people think. You're not trying to become a millionaire overnight. That's not what this is. And it's not a get-rich-quick business model. You're building a business step by step. Start with one landlord, then turns into 3, then turns into 5, and next you have 10, 20, 30. And before you know it, you've built this business that is generating you consistent cash flow every single month. And that's what excites me the most about this business model, is that it's not just about the money. It's the freedom and the ability to work remotely from anywhere in the world. And the ability to build a business that doesn't rely on you being on your phone or on site 24/7. That's how real businesses are built in 2026. One thing I want to touch on briefly is the legalities of this within Ireland and the UK. So, as a lot of you may know, there's regulations preventing certain short-term rental activities in Ireland and also the UK. But with Airbnb management, it's not your property and you're not taking it on a lease. So you don't have any of the risks that you'd have typically on a rent-to-rent deal or if you own the property. So let's say, for example, a lot of properties and a lot of people operating short-term rentals in Ireland need planning permissions to operate. If it's your secondary property, for example, you need planning permissions to put it on short-term rental. As an Airbnb property manager, you don't need planning permissions. Now, that's not to say there's no regulations that apply to you or your company, but there's much less than if you were to take it on a rent-to-rent basis. So much so that you can't even do rent-to-rent in Ireland because you'll need planning permissions. And you definitely can't scale if the council is down your neck looking to shut you down because you don't have planning permissions. We're Airbnb management because it's not your property and you don't lease it, you're just managing it. You can get through a lot of these regulations that would apply otherwise. And again, that's why I love this business model. If you're watching this and you're thinking, this actually sounds like something we could do, this doesn't sound out of reach for me, that's exactly why I wanted to make this video. Because most people never actually hear about Airbnb management, especially in Ireland. When we hear the word property, we just assume, oh, I can't do that. You need to be rich to do that. You need to have a background or, a college degree. Or you need to have a family that already have property. That is not the case with this. There is another way, and that is Airbnb management. And again, in my opinion, this is one of the best places to start in property and in business in general in 2026. If you'd like to learn exactly how we sign management deals, how we speak to landlords, and how we scale this into a real cash flowing business, I'll put a link in the description where you can book a free strategy call with my team. On the call, we'll have a chat about where you're at, what your goals are, and whether this is the right fit for you. If you got value from this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel because I make videos every single week breaking down everything about an Airbnb business, from finding your first property to scaling your portfolio. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.